Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Renegade Operative, and we are back to delve into a world full of blood, misery, and broken dreams. Reality can warp into a festering nightmare at any given opportunity. A familiar foggy town calls to us with a brand new heroine taking up the mantle is Silent Hill, and that means your average everyday individual is going to need some serious psychological therapy after this. I think it goes without saying that when you're measuring an impending terror, you don't really want much to think about. Silent Hill 3 was developed by Team Silent and published by Konami in 2003. Originally, Silent Hill 3 was molded in various ways as an initial project. A small sect of members began their own occultism and began divine work on this blood-soaked affair. It became quite clear that development went underway at the same time as Room 302, aka Silent Hill 4 The Room. The initial concept was crafting a major rail shooter which was leaping the dolphin way over the planet Neptune at this rate. Masahiro Ito even chimed in on the premise and said it was a terrible idea to do such a drastic deviation for the Silent Hill franchise. Like a tragic stab to the heart, we know this was a decision made from top brass. Konami saw that sales were middling for the last entry of Silent Hill. They wanted to put the dog down with a new trick that nobody wanted. Sadly, this premise hurt Team Silent financially as development was impacted by this decision. The rail shooter idea was tossed into the garbage with a layup, and one more card was left to play. In a 2005 interview with Game World, two developers from Team Silent discussed another rejected blueprint for Silent Hill 3. They said that the story was going to be in similar nature with a psychologically damaged individual. That sounds familiar. Only James would know. That sounds very familiar. It was going to be an extremely darker version of what came before. Logos even reflected this because with the beta of Silent Hill 3, we saw beta logos that looked exactly like Silent Hill 2 in retrospect. Apparently the story was still unique in a sense that it was going to be reserved for another title in the future. Biases aside, I understand why this wasn't an easily taken path for Team Silent. If you dare to be ambitious, then treading on familiar ground won't always cut it in favor of being unique. As Konami breathed down their necks, we ultimately saw Team Silent yet again conjure up an idea that evolved into something else that harkened back to the original game, reusing particular assets like part of the town itself in order to accelerate dev time. The storyline continued from the first game, allowing more connections and some lore establishment to be implemented there. This kept the original players in a lot more of a familiarized zone when the knife twisted upwards once we saw that it was connected to Silent Hill 1. Let me begin with the graphics and say that the graphics and visuals for Silent Hill 3 looks great. It's like there's more details that were given with the engine at hand compared to the second entry. This goes double for the enhanced character models. For example, you'll see Heather's facial features as more expressive when going from a cutscene and back to the in-game engine. Honestly, truth be told, that's the main issue I had with Silent Hill 2. It's obvious when there's a beautiful pre-rendered cutscene and then you switch over to the graphics. The gameplay engine and the graphical fidelity there just didn't look the same. You could tell it was a pre-rendered cutscene versus in-game engine, which didn't look that good with the in-game engine. And also, whoever put more love and care into the real-time rendering of the Otherworld deserves a massive raise for what they did with Silent Hill 3. Holy shit, the blood will deconstruct and rip apart and it will stick all over the shadows. It's like these quick crimson mass and veins will wrap themselves all over the ground. Sometimes they'll even stick to Heather and it'll take a life of its own in certain sections. It feels like this is a truly unique piece of level design and it leaves you wanting more and more on the palette. It feels like a truly living organ that's breathing, that's been stepped on via mud and tar. This game is absolutely sickening in terms of art design. It's creepy, it's intense, and it feels like a more harrowing transformation that happens much faster than normal, which didn't occur in the other games. It felt like they were doing some cheap parlor tricks to get the other world to work beforehand in the other games. This time around, it's just intense and it just comes at you in full circle. The gameplay also falls in line with Silent Hill's core identity. You're part of this sick, monstrous story, and there's only one goal: survival. This is a survival horror game, and the gameplay is at full work with the thematic involved. It is more of a bone-breaking experience this time around, because Silent Hill 3 is like a game with a lot more enemies. It's a lot harder, they have a lot more encounters, and there's a lot more engagement with the combat. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does harbor one critical point. I think these are the toughest otherworld encounters I faced so far, with bloated enemies that can sometimes block hallways when you're trying to run past them after shooting them with a shotgun. It's like a rope being pulled, for better or worse, in aspects of the combat and how to fight or flight. I know Silent Hill combat isn't really like eating the same rotisserie chicken that you would get from a Resident Evil title. An attempt was still made, and I still walked away feeling some slightly conflicting opinions. On the one hand, combat encounters felt a little bit more annoying in particular spots. Sometimes they weren't really that much fun, with tons of enemies pouring all over the place. On the other hand, Heather was given a lot more weapons in this one to mess around with, to toy around with. Pistols, knives, shotguns, pipes, even an SMG to riddle your foe with a hailstorm of bullets. I have to sit back and admire those bits and pieces, because who wouldn't want to take a ceremonial Japanese katana to the face of the bad guys in this game? Not to mention, there's a crazy amount of unlockables, like a beam saber katana, so you get your lightsaber justice. If you want to play Star Wars without George Lucas and the cocaine binge, you can do that in this game. Boss battles were just I guess they were alright, they were fine. Nothing really too special when you begin to think about it, really. Usually the game puts you in a situation where there's a big ass room and you try to find an enemy blind spot and you blow them away. They also try to give you some immaculate ways to approach a fight. Sometimes you're dealing with an enemy that might burrow in the walls and you have to find your way around them. Other times you might have to fight a giant ass, I don't know, lizard looking entity, and you have to get behind them, and there's gears that could damage you as an environmental, and you have to be careful of that. They give you options to really think about in these boss battles. However, you could tell that this game had fights pasted together rather quickly. The bosses look cool, but on repeat encounters you're looking for more unique moves and variations, and you might not get it here. That being said, I think there are okay to meh encounters where the variation comes with some cool shit here or there to play with in terms of your arsenal. You have to get some of the similar tactics in there to really knock things down and knock enemies down. You also have to approach an enemy, you might do a Randy Orton punt kick like 5 or 6 times in order to kill them. Not a lot has drastically changed from what you know. You're mostly sticking to what you know with basic Silent Hill gameplay, and sometimes that requires more punt kicks than usual. It's obviously weird. Can I give some extra cool points here? Probably. Heather has like a new responsive block button, which is leagues better than it was in Silent Hill 2. And finally, like, now it's like the Paperboy throwing out some good news. You can also find things where you can hold down your buttons and you can do more damage when an enemy is struck properly with it. You can jab the katana in and it'll have more animation frames, but you'll do more damage. You can be the judge on the damage value, but personally I think it is a serviceable system that they tried to add minor improvement to at best. It's standard flair though, it's not a revolution, yet it's probably the best it's gonna get. If you're just considering this game and the other 2 entries, it's probably better gameplay over Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2. But the camera itself, it can flail around a lot, and sometimes it can make it very hard to see, which is why the dynamic camera angles are a thing of the past. It just shows that, yes, this was something that shows his gray hairs a little bit. Everything else just fires on all cylinders, from exploration to the puzzle solving. If you like the brain busters of Shakespeare lore that came before with Silent Hill puzzles, then your masochist brain is gonna love this one. I was stuck on a few puzzles. They kicked my freaking ass. You will be stuck on puzzles, places, and segments, but I think that lends credence to the game itself, making it force you to think, really think outside the box, think hard, and figure out what is the task at hand and what has been given to you. This game also has some kick-ass design when the gears start to really grind. I was almost blown away by the fact that this game was only in development for 9 months, because they had so much to do with like everything involved in the game. They had so much to work on with so little time. The subtlety, the fear, and the ambiance just gets me giddy here. The voice acting has that surreal tight squeeze on it. It's good. Heather Mason feels like an organic girl who just merely wants to go against the forces that be. You obviously will meet other eccentric characters along the way, like Father Vincent or Claudia Wolf, or even Douglas himself. There are these crazy religious zealots who have their own agenda and they are at odds while worshiping a similar god. Everyone sounds on point for the script they are given here, and they match their personalities with a fine-tooth comb. It's perfect. Whether it's a joyful mood or a character being scary or downright disturbing, like, well, the signature happy birthday call.
You've got me mistaken for someone else. Today's not my...
I'm not mistaken. Today is your 24th birthday. And I have a present for you. Which do you prefer? To give pain or to receive it? You can have the one you hate the most.
It's something for everyone to chew on in this whole bloody affair, not to mention that Akira is finally back once again for musical composition. As I always say, it's never quite really Silent Hill without his display of music on board.
I need an ocean full of love, although I know the holes will still remain. And the Swiss cheese hot nose, only kindness can fill its holes. And love to dry my tears. As pain disappears, I need a miracle and not someone's charity. One drop of love from him and my heart's in ecstasy. The highlight is sending me is most likely ending me. I need a miracle and not someone's charity now.
The story is kind of like a missing peanut butter piece to some adjacent jam. I think in order for you to really appreciate the story and what it has to offer, you would have to play the first Silent Hill, because it's a direct follow-up to that game. Heather Mason is essentially the reincarnated daughter of the first hero, Harry Mason. It's a long and convoluted premise, but essentially there was another daughter named Alyssa Gillespie who was bullied in school, and originally she was meant to birth an entity known as God. A cultish religious regime known as the Order attempted to carry out this ritual by burning Alyssa alive, saying it was a simple house valve malfunction, yet Alyssa survived the ordeal. She was badly burnt and kept a secret, kept alive only where the Order and I think her mother, Delilah Gillespie, knew about it at the time. Alyssa then split her soul apart to conceal herself into another baby known as Cheryl. This was Harry's daughter, who he picked up in the intro of Silent Hill 1. Essentially, what they are telling you is, holy fuck, Cheryl is Alessa, Alessa is Cheryl. Both souls rejoin once more when Silent Hill 1 wraps up. There is a problem, however. God was successfully implanted into Alessa, meaning that one half has God inside of her as Heather grows up with this reincarnated form. The Order will eventually come to finish the ritual. Douglas Cartland, a private investigator, is sent to spy on Heather as she begins to have these nightmarish delusions about dying in a carnival. Obviously, she's a rebellious character and doesn't take any crap from anyone, including Douglas Cartland. So she runs off to do her own thing and try to get home to her father, Harry, immediately. Claudia Wolf is then thrown into the fray as a childhood friend of Alessa. You begin to have this sort of awkward sister relationship between her and Heather, between the two, where like Claudia kind of understands a lot more going on and she wants God to be birthed at all costs because faith is truly important. Later in the plot, it turns into a revenge quest after the first protagonist is slain by the missionary creature sent by Claudia. I love this dynamic shift because Heather is raging pissed. This is a business, bitch. This is personal. And the voice actor really hones in the anger, how she's like ready to go to bat for her dad with the mission at large. Then you're sent off to kill Claudia. We get more background story and details into the inner workings of the Order. You're peppering in that salt with tons of references to the first game, like scenes, dialogue, even the familiar hospital bed that Alessa was assigned to when Lisa Garland was taking care of her. It really hits home if you're a fan of the first game, and it hits home even more with Harry's death. You as a player, you feel like you lost something close to you with this character, and Heather feels the exact same pain. Heather kills Claudia, dumb blondes have fun, and you get the whole routine with the conflict in between. It's actually a giant love letter to the original with the plot and the context and the details. This game story just doesn't work as a standalone title like Silent Hill 2 did. It's like two parts that culminated to a much larger piece. It's deeply layered, sad, and downright depressing. There's a sigh of relief when you know that Heather is a stronger character at the end of the story, despite what was taken from her. It's a really good lore and it's a really good character build-up that sticks around. Ultimately, I give this game an 8.5 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. And I think an 8 out of 10 is better. I think it's a solid sequel that really builds on the first game and what was established, and I think this 8 out of 10 resonates with that. It's a large amount of replay value with unlockable content. It's a multitude of weapons and plenty of things to play with. I just think that what makes it less of a masterpiece kind of is the fact that the gameplay still isn't the greatest despite the improvements. And I guess the financial situation of Team Silent and them developing a rail shooter kind of hurt the budget and the length of the game, and you really feel it because this game is not as long as Silent Hill 2. You're looking at like maybe 4 to 6 hours of content, which could have been a little bit more extended. It could have had a little bit more meat on the bones as a full-fledged release. Despite the short length and despite the issues I had with some of the encounters being readily, frustrating, it is a great game that stands on its own merit. It's just a little bit flawed, which knocks it down from being a masterpiece. Overall, though, I enjoyed this experience a lot, actually, and I will recommend it to big Silent Hill fans. Definitely 8 out of 10. I almost said 8.5, but I caught myself slipping. I caught myself lacking for a minute. Anyway, this is Renegade Operative. I am signing out. This is my full review of Silent Hill 3 finished. What did you think of the game? Comment below and let me know. Also, I did play the HD collection as well, and I guess I could chime in on this. Some of the voices are weird, as it feels weird in that game, but sometimes I kind of liked it. I kind of like what they were going for in certain scenes where like Heather's mad or whatever near the end of the game. I think the new actress portrayed that really well, and then some scenes in the beginning where it's like, what is this acting? Like, what are these scenes? But it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Definitely, it was over dramatized in Twin Perfect's review with that game. There's parts where it worked, there's parts where it didn't work, but that's overall the summary of Silent Hill 3. And I'm mostly rating this based on the original voices, so that's my review of when I was glazing it like turkey. I meant that shit because the original voice acting was killer, man, and the new one had spots where I liked it and disliked it. But anyway, I'm signing out. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed this, liked it, had a good time, and hopefully this was a fair assessment of Silent Hill 3. I'm moving on to the next review, which is Resident Evil 4 Remake.